Hi, welcome to our podcasts on leadership. My name is Tom Desch. I've been an executive coach for over 20 years, working with leaders from across the organizational spectrum. Through my work as a coach, I've encountered so many amazing leaders, individuals who are doing wonderful work every day, who have stories that are full of insight, wisdom, joy, and angst. Our plan is to share a number of these stories with you, knowing that oftentimes that pearl of wisdom, that new glimpse of insight, can come from being a part of a conversation. Ultimately, we want to broaden the understanding of leadership at a time when individuals from around the country and around the world are examining and redefining what it means to be a leader in a world that's changing as rapidly as ours is. Thank you for joining us in this journey. If you like what you hear, please pass our site on to people that you know and consider subscribing so that we can continue to bring these stories directly to you. Our first podcast guest is someone I have known for her entire life and someone I have watched grow into an accomplished leader. She's my sister, Katie Simpkins, and she's the head of Katie's Hallmark and the owner of a collection of Hallmark stores in the greater Dayton, Ohio area. Katie, good to have you with us. All right, so anyway, what I wanted to do was just explore with you leadership sort of as you've experienced it in your life, with other people, with yourself, with your company. And I thought what I'd do is I just start with that first question that I had sent to you, which is a really broad one, which is when you think of a leader who's impacted your life, anytime during your life, who comes to mind and why?
Well, can I give two? Because
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Bosses. I have not had many people in a work setting, as leaders, and I've not been one to join a lot of committees. So I through Hallmark, I have seen leadership for sure, but because I don't have a continuing relationship with those people, some of them did affect me. But Dad would have to be one because he was my boss, and I saw him as a leader, not just in the business, but when we did the Mariah Stein thing, I went with him to all those board meetings. So I saw him kind of in different atmospheres or environments where he showed leadership. So it was interesting. The other, and it was a negative leader. It was a person I worked for when I was in college, and it was a chain of Hallmark stores in Cincinnati. And I learned a lot by negative leadership, a lot. In fact, she probably formed a lot of my early, way that I wanted to work with people and not work with people. So kind of doing really different types of leadership.
So yeah, so let me sort of dive into each one of those separately. So Let's go back to Dad first.
Okay.
What were the qualities when you saw him in a different leadership capacity? Like you were saying, with the negotiations with the Mariah Stein Retreat Center, in other settings, what were the qualities that he demonstrated that made you look at him and say, "Wow, he's a good leader"?
When he knew what he was talking about, and I saw him sometimes when he didn't know what he was talking about. It's a different kind of leadership. But when he knew what he was talking about, he was so confident. He was so well spoken. He really measured words. Words were very important to him, and what he said was very important. It was almost as if each sentence was a legacy to him. He really hung on to those words, and he spoke directly to people. He would look at people and really make the people feel a part of that conversation and a part of what he was thinking. So really a lot of one-on-one personal things with him. He's a very dynamic, he was could really express himself, like I said, through words, and then emotionally get people around that and get them wanting to work with him. I mean, I really saw that there.
Yeah, so stay on that if you would for a minute. When you think about that ability to engage other people, what was that? I mean, how did he demonstrate it?
Well, first of all, I think it came from a passion. It was something he wanted to do, and he wanted this done. And he wanted it done in a way, and he had to kind of let them know what he wanted to see, but also, this was his money going to their project. So they were really running the project, but he wanted to make sure he had a voice in that. So he just really spoke very confidently and very directly as to what he really wanted to see. And, that just the end result, what he wanted to see. And that's what he talked a lot about, what this would be for the community and what it would look like.
So he had an ability to look at what the end result was and to keep
Oh,
focused on that.
very much so. Very much so. And making sure that they understood what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so, yes.
And when he ran into obstacles that seemed to pop up that might get in the way of achieving that final outcome, how did he manage those?
I would say if it was a financial one, we sometimes we'd get in the car and he'd say, well, maybe I'm going to have to give more money because he realized that maybe, I don't want to say throwing money because that wasn't it, but working with the budget might get him more what he wanted. So he was able to hear, that there were limitations and that, within those limitations, this is what they could do. And maybe that wasn't always what he wanted. He wanted this bigger picture. So to do that, he knew that he might have to make some changes. And that change was because we changed the donation once or twice and increased the amount so that that end result would be more what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. And when he ran into barriers, conflicts, disagreements, differences of opinion, how did he manage those?
This is Dad we're speaking about. He did not like confrontation. He did not like disagreement. So I heard about it in the car later. Generally would not, I mean, he would speak his truth, speak what he wanted. And if it wasn't going in that direction, he may say, well, we may have to look at this a little differently. And sometimes I think they thought that meant he was going to take money away from the project, and it was actually the opposite. Now, I can't tell you if his intent was to trying to intimidate them a little bit, because I think sometimes that was what he was trying to do, intimidate him, that if he didn't get what he wanted, he may withhold money. But ultimately, it was funny. He just gave more money. So it was a little odd. So he would, I think, do a little bit of intimidation, if you call that intimidation, but just let them know that, and it was never confrontational, ever. It was always spoken very calmly, well, we just may have to relook at this type of thing. And I was getting the feeling he's going to take money away from it. And I know that's what they were thinking too. But that said, we'd get in the car and he'd be like, I guess we're going to have to give more money. So it's a little funny the way he would approach it. So again, he did not like confrontation. He would either avoid it or, try to work with it as much as he could. But in that setting, in a very professional setting, he did not want confrontation.
And did at the time, as you were going through that with him, did that feel like an asset or a liability?
It's a lot of it is knowing your room, knowing the people you're working with, and he knew the room. He knew that he could get his message across, and it may be, yes, he might have to add more money, but he wanted them to know this is what I want. Calmly getting his point across. But in the end, he was always looking at that end result. That's what he wanted.
Yep.
He's going to get it.
Okay. So let's look at that other person, the one that you experienced when you were in college.
Yes.
And you were talking about her as a negative leader, a person who led in a way that was not positive for you. So what were the elements of that leadership style
Okay.
that felt negative?
Her name was Chicky. Chicky was a manager of 5 Hallmark stores, worked very closely with the owner. She was older, and she didn't manage fairly at all. She managed very unfairly, treated people differently. Um, changed, I don't like to say change rules, but changed the game constantly, and nobody knew what the new rules were going to be. So if you're going to change the rules, you really need to let everybody know what the change is going to be and why. And she did not do that. And really the unfair, holding certain people to certain standards and other people not. It just created huge dissent. She thought everybody loved her, and to her face, they all loved her. But I was in the background. I heard all the unhappiness. I mean, just unhappiness. There was theft. They were stealing from her. And that's what happens when you don't respect, your owner or your manager. All
Hmm.
things happen. So it was just a really negative environment, but she didn't see it at all. It was amazing how a person can't see what's happening around. Amazing to me.
Hmm. And that kind of blindness, how did that impact you as
Oh,
a
I just,
as you look at yourself as a leader and as a young person at the time who was growing into the
yeah.
business environment?
Really just number one, keeping my eyes open. And I really learned because everybody like sucked up to her, but on the other hand, they were stealing. You know, I realized very early that this is horrible, but anybody is capable of anything. And my managers, my bookkeeper, I have 100% trust in them. However, anybody is capable of anything.
Hmm.
As a leader, you kind of have to be, I think, aware of that what somebody is saying is not necessarily what they're doing or thinking or acting behind. You're getting a one dimension a lot of times, as a manager, because that person sitting across from you wants to please you. They want to be, they want to be a good employee. Uh,
Hmm.
they're going to tell you what you want. So I learned there that what you see is not what you get. I mean, it truly wasn't. And she was not getting the best out of these people at all, just because of I believe, the environment she created. And it was one of just everyone kind of out for themselves and really taking advantage of her, although she didn't see it. That to me was just amazing.
Hmm. So if you were to categorize into two, three, four qualities of leadership that were negative from your perspective, um, what would those qualities be? In this
A
case,
negative,
negative qualities.
a negative quality. Uh, unfairness for sure.
Okay.
Um,
Unfairness.
not being able to be direct, because if you can't tell somebody exactly what you want, because she was just telling people, kind of what she wanted, and not necessarily being direct as to how you do that. This is what I want, getting their buy-in. So not being direct enough. And sometimes I'm a little guilty of that because I hate to assume people don't know what they're doing, but sometimes you do just have to assume people don't know what they're doing and be a little bit more direct. And, they can tell you, I know that, or something, and that's okay. So not being direct enough, definitely not being fair. Um, uh, and I guess not being able to see a big picture. She was living in this very tiny little space and not seeing
Hmm.
everything. And as a leader, it's hard. Sometimes you do see what you want to see. You don't see the other stuff, but you have to be honest with yourself and say, what is the big picture? What are we trying to do here? And yes, it's just retail or whatever, but we have a mission. What are we trying to do? And it has
Hmm.
more than making money, because if that's your only mission, you're never going to get the buy-in from the people working for you, because they're thinking, we're not getting the money. Who's getting the money?
Right.
What's
Yes.
this about? It's not just about making money. So yes, it's important. And that's one thing I've really shared with the managers, particularly when times we're a little leaner, is that the money is important. It is. It has to be what we're doing, but it's not, there's a way to make that money. And it's, taking care of our customers and creating a environment and all these other things. And if we do those things, hopefully, the bar raises and the money goes up, but that's not our only mission. And I remember the only time I would see the owner of that store, this chain of stores, she was the manager. He would be in his office counting money. It's the only thing I ever saw the man do, count money, just this. And that was a time when there was a lot more cash out in the market.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have much money to count. Counting our money takes about a minute and a half, but reconciling all of our credit cards, is a little bit different. But that image just sticks with me of him counting his money, that's what he did. That was his input to the business, is making money.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at yourself as a leader, what do you feel the qualities are that you bring to the table as the leader of your company, of the stores that you own? What are those qualities that you feel you bring to the table?
Honesty, number one. They know that I'm honest, that I'm going to tell them, the truth or what's going on. I'm a good listener. As a manager, I have to be able to listen to what they're saying. And that, going back to dad was not a good listener. He was a good listener when things were good, but if it was bad, he was not a good listener. He just didn't want to hear it. Covered his ears, don't want to hear it. And he and I had issues with that. When I was trying to tell him, things that weren't good, I have to be able to tell him those things and my suggestions on how we fix those things. Whether it was theft or, relationships with vendors, whatever. He just didn't want to hear it. He just wanted me to deal with it or shut up, I don't want to deal with it. So being able to listen and hear those negative things and, ask for input. Bottom line, my managers know my decision is ultimately the decision. However, I always want the input to make that decision. They may not get exactly what they wanted, but at least I'm going to listen. And if it's not going to work, their suggestion, I'm going to tell them why. I'm not just going to say, okay, fine, but I'm going to do what I want to do because I know the business. So really being a good listener, leading by example. I'm never going to ask anybody to do something I wouldn't do. Bottom line, never. I'm never asking them to lie. I mean, even when they answer the phone here and I'm here, they know I don't want them to lie and say I'm not here if I don't want to take any calls. Don't lie. I don't want that. Again, I don't like to lie, so I want people to have to lie for me. I'll never ask them to do something I'm not comfortable doing myself. So those kind of things, I mean, really basic, personal things, one-on-one, how you develop people is kind of what I think is important.
So if you had to categorize in just 2 or 3 or 4 words or terms, those qualities that you feel you bring to the table as leader that have worked for you, what would they be then?
Honesty,
Honesty,
being a good listener,
good listener.
whatever that is, directness,
Okay.
and openness. You really have to be open to listen to, that goes, I guess, with listening, but just being open to new ideas and challenges. And that's part of, being a leader too, is just that constant change and being willing to work with that change and change yourself and change your model at times, and that's the hard stuff. That's really.
One of the things that you mentioned when you were talking about dad and his leadership style, and also the woman from your college days, was that ability to see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel you manage that as a leader?
Well, you kind of got to be you got to be thinking time out, whether that's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. So to me, the big picture is, ultimately, what do I want to achieve? With my business, my big picture was creating an environment that was good both for my customers and for my employees. Really important. We're primarily, all female owned, female management. I have one guy that delivers for me, and he feels, I think, kind of special because he comes in for 2 hours a week among all these women. but when you put that many women together, you just have to create an environment, and very fair. My managers know that, I evaluate them. That's one thing I do, is how are they working with their staffs, because I want them to be fair. If they're going to treat people differently, it's just never going to work. So my big picture would be, really um, just trying to work on what I want that environment to be. Again, both for the customer and for my team, but then also being the one that's thinking forward, always thinking beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And in our case, thinking we're a seasonal business, so we're always thinking 6 months out. Well, I have to be thinking of the financial things to make things work in 6 months. So that big picture is, being able to look at all aspects of the business, which is one reason I like this business, is it's so different. I'm not doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing different things every day, whether it's being a buyer, being a manager, working with the managers, dealing with vendors, just different things. So that big picture is being able to juggle all those balls and see in the distance, which one am I going to have to be working on in the next week or two? My marketing, I've got to spend more time over here. So being able to juggle those balls to keep that big picture in focus so that it doesn't get too lopsided, and to that vision. I have to share that with my leaders, my two managers and the bookkeeper. They need to know kind of what my vision is.
So when you think about, no, let me rephrase that.
Mhm.
If you were to put yourself in the position of your employees looking at you as their leader, what do you believe they see from you as the most effective leadership qualities that you bring to them as the employees?
Um, I would think they would see my dedication to it, and
Okay.
that that I would do whatever needs to be done because they see me here, they see me doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So walking the walk, talking the language, doing all of that and truly believing it. Those would probably be the big ones, the dedication to it and knowing that they're a part of this. It's important that even when I had 6 stores and 70 employees, that I knew everyone's name. And that's something I learned from Dad, that personal part of it, being very personal with everybody working for you, and making them feel a part of something a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to that, to Chicky, the negative leader. Yeah, she may have known everyone's name, but she maybe didn't use your name if she didn't like you. I honestly, there's been employees I don't really care for, when you have that many employees. I mean, I've had hundreds of people go through here over 40 years. But they're never going to know I don't like them. I'm still going to give them the courtesy. They're serving a purpose, and maybe it's just something, you don't gel with everybody, that's for sure. But if they're doing their job and they're working well with that manager, that's good. That's good. I'm not going to stomp on that.
Yep. So one final area I'd like to just explore for a second, and that is, you are sort of at the end of your career as a business owner.
Mhm.
And when you look at the leaders coming up, whether that's somebody who's taking over, your company at some point, or just leaders in general,
Mhm.
if you had one message as an elder, if you will, to
Elder,
pass on,
thanks.
what would you pass on to the leaders of today who may be listening to this podcast and who are wondering, wow, what's most important for me to focus on?
Hmm. I think the listening component is extremely important, will become, even more important with all the social media and the way people interact. You have to truly be able to listen. And I was listening to something last night, and it was about emotions and interpersonal relationships. And the woman said, listening is really important, but believing what people are telling you, believing that's the truth. And that just kind of like hit me, because I know I don't always believe people, because it's not my truth.
Hmm.
It's not my experience, because emotion comes from, history and biology, and that I don't share that with that person. So when they're telling me something, sometimes I just don't believe them. And that I think I've got to do better at that, and realizing um, that they're speaking their truth, that I
Hmm.
believe them, even though I can't identify with that, to really listen and to believe what you're hearing.
That's a really powerful thing to understand that somebody, when they're speaking their truth, even if
Right,
it's not our truth. And
right,
even if it sounds like they're off in some other world.
exactly. Exactly. So, I have been quick to dismiss that, I think, in the past, that, okay, whatever. I'm not going for that. I'm not believing that. But I think we do have to believe people, Are you going to get taken advantage of at times? Yes, absolutely. But, I think it's important to give people that benefit to truly believe what it is they're saying, particularly in a manager role that or a leadership type role. If you're asking for input, you better believe what they're telling you.
Hmm.
Because I realized dad didn't believe me, I think, a lot of times. I think he thought I was over emotional. Um, he just didn't believe. He maybe understood the situation, but didn't believe me.
Hmm.
Hurt. That really bothered me. So kind of taking, what I heard last night, just, yeah, I really have to work on. That's something, at 63, I want to start working on, is really listening to people and believing what it is they're telling me.
Yeah, when we don't believe them, then we feel discounted,
Mhm.
or they feel discounted.
They feel right,
Yeah.
right, right. And we're not really going forward using their knowledge or their information. We've dismissed
Hmm.
it instead of really listening, because maybe they are emotional. Maybe they have made this bigger than it is, but there's something there. So you really have to listen to what is it, what is it, and talk to them about that and find out what is there. Particularly if you don't believe it, it almost needs more conversation.
Hmm.
So anyway, that is definitely one thing. I heard this morning, Colorado's trying to pass what, a 35-hour work week. All I'm going to tell you, in retail, I don't know how that's going to work. All you young people out there, I choose wisely your career. It can't all be done from your home office. Thinking, all the service workers, and whether that's restaurants or retail, or working in any type of a service industry, sometimes it's not about a 35, 40-hour work week. It's about, you have to get the work done. And sometimes that means, digging in there and just getting it done. It doesn't mean you're a workaholic. It just means sometimes you have to get the work done. That's all.
Hmm.
So people aren't going to want to hear that part. Sorry.
All right, but hey, words of wisdom, and it's your truth.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Um, I think that's probably, unless you have anything you would like to add, um, any words of wisdom you want to pass on?
No, I mean, with any leader, be doing something you like, because if you don't like it, that whole thing, you really do. If you, and it doesn't have to be passion, just like what you're doing, enjoy it, find out what it is that you enjoy about that job. And if it means transitioning from that position to something else, learn what you liked about that job, and what you didn't like, and build on that. Because yeah, you don't want to just be working jobs, for money, and not enjoy what you're doing.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is what people want, is just the money. But I would think at the end of the day, I want to be able to feel good about what I did today.
I think that's really smart, and I think there are many people who start off working for money and realize that doesn't really do it for me.
Right.
Really doesn't make me as happy internally as I would like to be. And it's that
Right.
sense of fulfillment, that sense of I'm bringing something to the world, to my business, to the company, to my community,
Mhm.
whatever it is.
Mhm.
That resonates with me.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about working from home and things. Sometimes I think that's people will miss that interaction. That's one thing I love about what I do is I interact with my managers. I can go out on the sales floor, interact with some customers.
Hmm.
I don't do well, all by myself. Then I start getting a little wacky, you know. I need that kind of disruption of my own mind by interacting with other people, and realizing what's really important.
Yep.
So,
Well, that sounds like a good place to start,
all
to stop.
right.
I mean. Well, I really want to thank you. I appreciate your willingness to experiment with
Yeah,
it.
let me know where it goes for sure. Keep me posted.
All right, I will do that.
Hey, take care.